stadium at the opening ceremony, and I think really he should have made a stand and said, either you get together with the Dalai Lama, come on, let's face up and have some constructive dialogue about the plight of 7 million Tibetans, or I'm going to encourage the Australian team and the athletes to go to compete with the other athletes who are free of bloodstains and free of repression, but not with you.
So, Bob, do you think that athletes should be going to the Games?
Oh, yes. They didn't choose. They didn't make the political decision to have the Games in Beijing. And I'm totally behind the athletes going to the Games. But I'm not in favour of our politicians then going and kowtowing, effectively, to the bullies and the thugs who are in government in Beijing. You know, they repress any other political party. They only have single-party elections, much like Mr Mugabe in Zimbabwe, but there's a total different approach because of our trading arrangement. And money and power here must not be allowed to simply put aside the human considerations we have for the right of Tibetans to be free, to celebrate their own religion and to have their rights restored.
Melinda Liu, when China won the bid to host the Olympics back in 2001, it did promise, albeit vaguely, to improve human rights and media freedoms. Do you think it has?
I think we have yet to see Chinese authorities living up completely to the promises they made when they won the bid for the Olympics. For example, it was very simple and clear at the time that they promised foreign media would be free to report. And indeed, they even liberalized the 1980s era regulations for foreign reporters in China, making it easier and simpler. However, we've seen since the outbreak of the riots in Lhasa, foreign correspondents in China have not been able to make free and independent trips on their own to report on the situation. And of course, one of the big tragedies of this, what is already a big tragedy, is that what happened is still not clear to everybody. The opaque nature of the facts and statistics that have come out to date make it very difficult for anybody to know really what happened in March.
Well, also Human Rights Watch has accused the Chinese government of jailing people who've criticised the Games. Is there any evidence of that? Do you have evidence of that?
Well, it's well known that activists such as Hu Jia, for example, who was detained in December 27th, I had spoken to him just a week before he was arrested. He had criticized the Games, yes. He had also criticized other aspects of China's human rights policies, so it's hard to say it was only because of the Olympics, but paradoxically he said to me something like, oh, if it weren't for the Olympics, I'd be in jail by now, because he thought it sort of gave him more breathing space, and indeed a week later he was in jail, and his wife remains under a very strict sort of house arrest with their small baby.
And what about you? Have you ever been harassed or received threats as a result of the reporting you do?
I've received anonymous death threats, which I think is of a different nature than if you actually receive something very specific that says, you know, like one of my colleagues, you know, you better watch out for the health of your two beautiful daughters. Now that is a really chilling thing. I haven't received something that specific, but not only death threats, vandalism in my apartment, but I count myself not among the foreign correspondents who have been most stridently targeted. I think.
And do you know where those threats come from, Melinda?
It's hard to know. Often they come through anonymous emails or anonymous cell phone text messages. There's no way to know, really.
Tracy Holmes, you've lived and worked in Beijing, and now you're heading back there to cover your 7th Olympics. Is it going to be different in terms of what journalists can and can't do and can and can't report, do you think?
Well, I think we have to wait and see, but a lot of the promises made are made in as far as reporting the Games themselves, and that, you know, everyone should be free to expect that in reporting the Games and reporting the sports, there will be no problems. But I think once you step outside that domain, that's where the issues arise.
And are you concerned about the issues that we've been hearing about tonight? Does that
Well, of
influence
course, but,
you as somebody who's a lover of sport and a lover of the Olympics?
Look, I love sport, and I absolutely loved the time I spent in Beijing, and it opened my eyes to so many things. There are major issues, but what I think is important is that things need to be seen in a total. We can't just look at one side of the story. We really need to consider the other side of the story as well. And when we're talking about human rights abuses, we're not just talking about the struggle that Tibetans have faced for a long time, but there's the Uyghur region, which is full of Muslims, Chinese Muslims. They face a terrible time.
Well, I think there is general concern about human rights issues inside China as well as Tibet.
But the other thing that is not often pointed out is the fact that, you know, in recent history, 400 million people inside China have been moved out of poverty. And, I mean, that is a phenomenal result, and it's never been achieved anywhere else on the planet. I mean, that is something that they do need to be given credit for.
David, are we expecting too much of China?
I think we are if you hand Olympic Games to them and say you need to focus on that, because for China it was always going to be about the economic prosperity, and that's clearly the big driver for them. So I think the human rights was an easy thing for them to run with. But again, I keep coming back to the athletes. It's the Olympics going forward. I guess it always has been political, but this is probably one of the most blatant uses of it as an event.
Mareike, as an athlete, you mentioned before you're not allowed to wear your headband. And just getting back to the question of freedom of speech, have you been told what you can and can't say when you get there?
It's all been kind of confusing to me, what I can and can't say, and also what I'd want to get involved in, because obviously there's not a lot of athletes in this room who are actually going. I think I'm probably the only one. So to be out there putting out all these views is probably going to be quite detrimental to my performance. So you really have to look at what would I achieve by speaking out and what would it cost me, and it's a big decision. And I don't have a very high profile. A lot of the Paralympians don't, so I really question, even if I did do something, would it have any impact and would it help anybody?
Simon, are you worried about these issues? We haven't talked to you yet about these issues, freedom of speech.
Yeah, the point I was going to make is, and at the risk of being slightly controversial, I bore the brunt as part of the IOC Evaluation Commission, which looks at 18 technical themes in judging whether a city can put on a good games or not, and we make a recommendation to the IOC. Tibet, rightly or wrongly, was not really on the radar in 2001 as an international issue, but the human rights itself was an issue, yes, but the only commitments made were, ironically, by Chinese officials saying they hoped the Games coming to China would bring about social change. Now, yes, there haven't been the improvements and Jacques Rong mentioned this a while ago, that a lot of us would have hoped for in terms of social change. There have been in other things, but there haven't been in social change. But there was never any firm promise, you know, and not that you can measure it in many terms, that if we win the Games, we will do this. It was more a Chinese Olympic official's hope that would happen.
So it was vague.
Yes, very vague.
Well, coming up, we'll look at the legacy, what the legacy is likely to be of the Beijing Olympics. That's coming up on Insight.